Williams, you there?
Yeah, hi.
Go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to ask, if Obama has been leading the polls
if he's been,
for well over 35 days straight in all polls put together.
Okay. Sam Rogers, you want to try that?
Well, he has maintained that lead, but when you get into these states, you can have very small margins. You know, a 2-3 percentage point lead is just a couple of thousand votes in a state like Missouri or Nevada, and so you've got to be very careful. And if you have a very targeted turnout effort in the last few hours, the 72 hours before the campaign, you can swing a state, even though if you are behind in the polls. So it's all about looking at those battlegrounds.
You know, Chris, we had to go ahead.
And you have to remember that, one, we have the Electoral College in America, which means that you get certain number of delegates by state, and so it is possible to lose the popular vote here and still win the presidency. This is the rule we've had in place since since the founding of this nation, and it's in place for very good reason. With that said, you also have to understand that you have to accept you have to accept the turnout models that the media in America is using, and they are giving higher weight to younger voter turnout than they ever have in polls before, higher Dem turnout, higher African American turnout, and there's just no historical basis to make that claim as of yet.
Michael Maslansky, an email that came in from...
Yeah, and I would just add, I mean...
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, you know, I think that there is a lot in the turnout models that has to do with younger voters, African American voters, Hispanic voters. I think we're going to look back on this on Wednesday, and this is going to be a different kind of election than the elections that we've seen over the last 20 years. I think that it will break the models. I think we just don't know how it's going to break the models and how much it's going to break the models. I think one of the things that a lot of people aren't talking about, which is also, I think, going to play a big part, is to what extent conservatives who have been excited by the inclusion of Sarah Palin on the ticket actually end up coming out, or whether they see a 7-point deficit in the polls, and in some cases 5, 10 greater deficits in the polls in key swing states, whether they decide that, look, McCain really wasn't their guy to begin with, and they just decide to stay home. I think that as much as history would point to the fact that African Americans and young voters are likely to kind of be enthusiastic, or at least young voters likely to be enthusiastic up until the election, there's a real risk for McCain-Palin that the conservatives who have tried to bring this ticket back to life just decide that it's not going to happen, and we'll wait for 4 years until who knows who runs.
Well, Michael, let me put it in terms of an email question we got and get a quick answer from you on this. From Hungary, Ildiko Kalman wrote in saying, Democrats are set to win because of the one-party domination over the last 8 years. People just feel the need for change and want the other to win. So could that potential for an Obama White House actually be more resting on the simple fact that people just want to see a change, as opposed to all the other factors that we've been talking about, from race to young votes and so on?
I think that that's definitely a huge part of it. I think, you know, it's a testament to both the makeup of America and the nature of the McCain-Palin campaign that it's as close as it is, because so many people do want to change from where we've been over the last 8 years. I think McCain's done a good job of keeping the election reasonably close and an election. But I think at the end of the day that people do want change. My sense, unfortunately for the McCain campaign, is that to the extent that undecideds actually vote, that they're going to break for Obama.
Well, let me get a quick batch of emails we got in that express similar sentiments. I want to put these to Sam Rogers. I'll read 3 back to back, basically. One's from Malaysia. The caller didn't give their name. It just says, Obama's the next president of the United States. McCain is just a warrior who wants to add more problems to America. And this one that came in from Juliana in Paris in France says, it is indeed a tight race, but I am certain Obama will win. As we have a few undecided voters, I urge them to vote for Senator Obama, because one extra vote means an extra change for Americans. And the last one from China here, from Oladipo Abiyi, says, I'm a Barack Obama supporter in China. By the grace of God, he must win this election. Now, similar sentiments from very diverse areas. How much do you think international sentiments like this will influence American voters?
Well, I don't know that they play a huge factor. It's great to know that the world is watching this election, and that people all across the globe care about the fate of our election. But Americans are very particular and pride themselves on their independence. Like voters in New Hampshire, for instance, routinely like to reject voters in Iowa in their decisions. So with that independence in mind, I think Americans like to make up their own mind and discount opinions from overseas. But it is nice to know that sentiment is there.
Well, now I just want to remind our viewers you can join our conversation. Don't forget, go to livestation.com and just download some software. You'll be able to join the chat live with your questions and comments. We've got to pause for a short break here. More on this discussion when we return.
The questions that matter.
Who's to blame? Of course I take the blame for that. Of course the Afghan government takes the blame on that.
The answers that count.
Why do you think the world watches this issue?
Turkey is the only Muslim country fulfilling European democracy.
The world's decision makers in the spotlight.
A final status for Kosovo is not going to mean the end of international concerns.
All they got out of al-Qaeda was death and destruction.
Talk to Al Jazeera.
It's 36 to 38 degrees Celsius. No higher, no lower. It's soft, but not too soft. It's just enough to smooth things out. It's all of this, halfway to anywhere, with plenty of time to spare. The Qatar Airways Premium Terminal in Doha. 5-star service for first and business class passengers. Qatar Airways, the world's 5-star airline.
Interest rate cut in the United States gave Shanghai...
From the world to your phone. Al Jazeera Mobile.
Welcome back. We're discussing the final stretch of the U.S. presidential campaign as Americans line up for their big election day. I have three guests. From New York is Michael Maslansky, a Republican pollster and president of Luntz Maslansky Strategic Research. Chris St. Hilaire is the president and founder of M4 Strategies, a Republican pollster. And with me is Sam Rogers of Zogby International. Let's get back to some questions here. And Mike Maslansky, have you or any of the people you know working in your field actually looked at what happens the day after? If things don't go as obviously some of the voters plan, if they don't get their candidate in, what do you expect to happen?
Well, I think that if there is a McCain victory, there will be a significant outcry on Wednesday. I think it's a fairly slim chance of happening. I think if it's close, that we're not in a good position as Americans coming after the last two elections to handle a close disputed race. And so, unfortunately, and I'd never want to see any of this happen, I think it gets very ugly very quickly. Fortunately, I think that it's not likely to happen. Not fortunately that Barack Obama is going to win necessarily, but that it's not going to be a close race. It will be decided, and people will be able to move on to the issue of how well Obama and a new Congress will govern.
Chris, if I could put an email question to you that came in from Suriname, from Roy Bichari, who wrote in saying, how responsible was the choice of Sarah Palin? So what happens if, God forbid, McCain dies? How much do you think that's influencing potential McCain voters?
Well, I think one fact that's lost in this entire debate is that Barack Obama was in the U.S. Senate for less than 170 days before he launched his campaign for president. So you can argue that Sarah Palin doesn't have enough experience to be vice president, but the fact is she's got at least as much experience governing as Barack Obama ever did before he launched his candidacy. So one effect of the Sarah Palin campaign has been to energize the Republican base where they weren't necessarily energized before because John McCain has been such a maverick over his career. The fact is, this is a candidate, John McCain, with a long history of reaching out to Democrats, of working with Democrats, of sometimes taking on his own party to do what's right and from his perspective in the best interest of America. And so you've got a candidate who, by all rights, given the political environment, given how unpopular George Bush is, should be losing by double digits, yet this race in many respects is still a close one.